It is Ryan Seacrest here. There was a recent social media trend which consisted of flying on a plane with no music, no movies, no entertainment. But a better trend would be going to ChumbaCasino.com. It's like having a mini social casino in your pocket. Chumba Casino has over 100 online casino-style games, all absolutely free. It's the most fun you can have online and on a plane. So grab your free welcome bonus now at ChumbaCasino.com. Sponsored by Chumba Casino.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 21 plus. Terms and conditions apply.
Tape Deck Media.
Step right up. Listen to the Awful Service Podcast. It's future radio on your computer phone. You've heard of Hanna-Barbera, Laurel and Hardy, Sears and Roebuck, now Doyman Cocazello. Are you a bean counter at your boring job? Listen to the Awful Service Podcast. We've got segments. We've got guests. We've got Karens.
The Awful Service Podcast, available where all podcasts are streamed. Brought to you by Tape Deck Media.
Good morning, Ruddlers. Welcome back to Ruddle Me This podcast. As always, I am your faithful host, Taylor Ruddle. Happy Monday to you. Hope you had a good weekend, and hopefully you've got some exciting stuff planned for this week waiting for you. Today's episode is going to be the first in, I suppose, a mini series that's something I've been wanting to do for a while. It is the Ruddle Me This book club. I've been trying to be a little more intentional with reading books rather than doom scrolling this year. So I dug up an old iPad mini that I had lying around somewhere, and I've been sort of putting aside a little bit of time where I'd usually be sitting around playing video games or doom scrolling, and I've been reading instead. And I was weirdly inspired by a video that I saw that was actually talking about the singer Dua Lipa, who is apparently a really smart, book interviewer, for lack of a better word. She's done all these interviews with authors, and apparently the whole thing of doing a celebrity book club is very kitsch at the moment, and a lot of them do it more for clout or for just trying to sell products or trying to, influencer reasons. But apparently Dua Lipa, her book club is really, really good to listen to. So that kind of inspired me a little bit. Not because I think I'm good at reviewing books, but I just thought it'd be fun to talk about some of the books that I've been reading on the podcast. So we'll go into them now. I've read a couple since starting this year. I ended up, I know using ChatGPT is a controversial topic these days, but one thing it really helped me do was to make a reading list. And I'm hoping that one of the sort of kinks sort of gets straightened out of AI is obviously we need more regulation, but the sort of thing I can see it being very useful for, and I think it sounds like people are most optimistic about AI, is for things like pattern recognition. It's apparently very good at spotting abnormalities in X-ray scans, and it can pick up cancer better than people can. And then also another good thing you can use it for is recommending you books. So the two books I'm going to talk about today are a book called The Invisible Hook, and that is by Peter Leeson. It is a book about the economics and the sort of pragmatism that went into pirates. It's based on an economic principle called the invisible hand. And the other book is Kitchen Confidential by Anthony Bourdain. I was sort of reading these two books in tandem. I started reading The Invisible Hook because of a CGP Grey video where he sort of talked about a lot of the concepts that The Invisible Hook deals with. And I thought, that's this. He acknowledges at the end of the video that The Invisible Hook was a big inspiration for his videos. So I thought, I'll just go and read The Invisible Hook. And simultaneously, I was reading Anthony Bourdain's memoir, Kitchen Confidential. And once I got into The Invisible Hook, I don't know what I expected. It's a book of economics, and it's a book around, the economics of piracy. And I just thought it was going to be a bit more exciting than it was. It's a very dry read. There are there's a lot of really cool information in it, but it's not exciting to read at all. And so I was sort of using Kitchen Confidential as a bit of a palate cleanser. I was reading a bit of The Invisible Hook, Then I'd switch over to Kitchen Confidential, and I finished The Invisible Hook first because I was kind of forcing myself to read that a lot quicker because I wasn't really enjoying it, although there were some interesting tidbits that I did glean from it. Like the idea of having a captain with pirates is an interesting one because the golden age of piracy was happening when most of the world was a theocracy. There wasn't a lot of democratically elected leaders, but pirates would have, they had a sort of democratic-ish system with the way they would elect their captain. And it was actually very interesting. Like, the captain obviously had a lot of power in the role of a pirate ship, but they weren't actually paid that much more than their crewmates. They would sort of divide the loot by shares, and each pirate would get one share, and then I think the quartermaster and the bosun would get 1.5 shares, and then the captain would get 2 shares. So, I mean, the captain was earning twice as much as the average pirate, but he wasn't earning, like, proportional to the crew's plunder, if that makes any sense. The book also talks about the fact that the pirate democracy was an interesting one because the crew could very easily get rid of the captain if they felt the captain wasn't serving the best interests of the crew. And so that was kind of the check and the balance, is that the captain had absolute power. All of the crewmates had to obey the captain. However, if the crew agreed that the captain wasn't serving their best interests, they could very easily vote to remove the captain. And I'm sort of fascinated with the idea of systems and institutions and leadership and governing people and all that sort of thing. So it was an interesting little tidbit that's kind of stuck in my mind, the idea that if you want to have a sort of functioning democracy, you need to have a check in place for the absolute power of whoever's in charge. There's also some really cool little tidbits about pirates, like pirates and merchants used to have this sort of cat and mouse game where the pirates would be trying to make their ships look less dangerous and less fast at a glance, and they would be doing things like covering up gun ports with sheets that were kind of the same color as the side of their ship so that it looked like they didn't have as many guns as they had. And they would be doing things like dragging cargo in a net in the water behind them so that the ship wouldn't be as fast as it would be moving slower than it could move. And the idea would be that they would be flying like the English colours or the Spanish colours, and then when they were close enough to get them, they would raise that the famous black flag, and they would cut the nets, and then they'd pick up all the speed suddenly. And the idea was that they would be trying to scare the merchant ship into surrendering without a fight, because like ultimately the pirates didn't really want to fight because, you know, the ship gets damaged, sailors get injured, and there's all these costs. It was purely economic. There's all these costs that came up with if the merchant ship tried to defend itself. So ideally the pirates just wanted the merchants to surrender immediately, and so they would use this kind of shock and awe tactic to try and get them to do that. So it's a very interesting book, but it was a slog of a read. So yeah, check it out if you want. That's not the main reason I was sort of doing this episode. I just kind of wanted to talk about the fact that I did read that as well. The other book I read that I want to talk about more is Anthony Bourdain's Kitchen Confidential. Now, off the top of my head, I can't remember exactly what year this was released, and I think it was like 2000 or sometime around there. And I am someone that was only familiar with Bourdain recently, so as far as I'd been aware, he'd always been famous. And this book is really interesting to read because he starts out essentially talking about how he's just an anonymous chef working in New York City kitchens, and he talks about like, I'll be, roasting bones to make stock tomorrow, and he talks a lot about how he was sort of worried about backlash from the industry, from chefs that he'd worked for or restaurant owners that he'd worked for, and it's all very interesting to read it, trying to picture what his life was like at the time compared to where he sort of ended up. I mean, obviously, rest in peace. Really sort of tragic end to that story. Not something that I feel not something that I feel sort of qualified or like I have any sort of reason to speak on Anthony's death, apart from just the fact that I think it's very sad, and I feel for the guy, you know. But the book goes through, it's a really fascinating read because it sort of goes through, there is a narrative to it, it starts off talking about how he got interested in food. He went on a holiday to France with some family, and it was, I think, mussels or oysters. I don't really know the difference, but eating those fresh in a boat where they just caught them was sort of the thing that sparked his love of food. And it goes through his whole sort of career, going through Culinary Academy, which is weirdly called the CIA, Culinary Institute of America, I suspect. And then he sort of talks about all these absolute characters that he met throughout his years working as a chef in kitchens all over, like mostly North America and specifically the East Coast of America. And he kind of just talks about all this sort of, there's so much drug taking in this book. He only refers to it as dope, so I don't know whether he means heroin or cocaine or exactly what. Probably a lot of different things, but yeah, a lot of drug taking in this book, and he also talks about a lot of what's a nice word? Fornication happening between chefs and waitstaff, and yeah, everyone for lack of a better word, everyone was shagging everyone in the kitchen apparently. And it's like you following him through his sort of life, but then every so often there'll be a chapter where it sort of cuts away and he'll give you like the skinny on something in the restaurant business. Like it's things that you never think about, but it all kind of makes sense from a logistical standpoint. And like in my head, I always think like you go to a restaurant and the food's going to be pretty consistent no matter what day you go in there. But then he talks about how he's like, the real foodies, I mean, there wasn't a word for foodie back then, but people that appreciate food go in, they go in on a Monday or a Tuesday because that's when the chef is at his freshest. Like, he's just had a couple of days off, he or she, they have just had a couple of days off. They've had a rest on Sunday, back in on Monday, and, the stock will have come in Monday morning, so they're sort of, everything's fresh, the chef's rested, and they apparently look at, like, weekend diners as sort of like, oh, these rubes, they're coming in on the weekend, and you're going to have your hamburger and your steak, are you? And, like, there's apparently a level of sort of, like, they look at them as kind of like the idiot diners, whereas like the real people that appreciate food, they come in on Mondays and Tuesdays, and they'll get like a better experience dining there. The only situation where I've seen that to not be the case here in Christchurch is I went to Denny's once. Like I've been to Denny's a bunch of times on the weekends, and the food I always found the food quality to be like good, but during the week, it feels to me like there's a drop, especially if you go during the day, during the week. And if I had to guess, I'd say it's probably because they put their newer staff on during the week, so that they can practice when it's like a bit less busy. But yeah, that's the case where it's been the inverse. I always think you get a better experience if you go at a busier time at Denny's. That's just me though. Very anecdotal, as I say. He also talks about how, I think it's like, never order fish on a Monday because that fish has probably been ordered on Thursday because they get their stock in on weekday mornings but not on the weekends. So if you're eating fish on a Monday, it's probably been sitting around in the chiller since Thursday the week before. He also talks, it was bizarre, he talks about these, because this book's nearly 30 years old now, and he talks about these dining trends that are so fascinating to me. Like apparently tuna as you might, tuna fish, was apparently like it was like an up and coming, like the new kid on the block tuna. And it was apparently this unheard of fish that people didn't eat until it was coming up in the early 2000s apparently. And apparently before that, swordfish had been a big thing that people were eating. But then he talks about how apparently swordfish is apparently infested with parasites. So he's like, never eat swordfish, which, I've never been in a situation where I've had to turn down swordfish. I've never been in a situation where I've been presented the opportunity to turn down swordfish, I should say. So it's never been an issue. But apparently don't eat swordfish. And there are other bits and other foods that he sort of mentions that he sort of speaks about them as if they're this kind of new thing and they're completely commonplace today, which is, it's very interesting. There's also a part in the book where he's talking about the difference in environment between his kitchens and these other other chefs' kitchens, and the way Anthony talks about his is that it's utter chaos. There's, the Rolling Stones or other some kind of rock and roll music playing loudly, and the chefs are all shouting at each other and bumping into each other, and people are holding on to hot pans with their hands, and he really paints this picture that it's utter chaos. And I think if you've watched the TV show The Bear, that's the kind of thing that Bourdain's talking about, the environment that he's talking about in his books here. And so he spends the whole kind of book talking about how this is like every single kitchen he came up in. All the environment was always like this. It's chaos. No matter where you go, it's always chaos. But then he talks about seeing other chefs' kitchens and talks about how, they're these like smooth, well-oiled machines and everybody working in tandem, and it's quiet, and they might just be softly saying to each other, okay, fire one, I need hands, whatever all the expressions are. And so I thought, is that abnormal? Or is just Anthony just this maniac behind the kitchen where only his kitchens are just this chaotic, shouting, angry mess? I found that very interesting because the TV show The Bear, I like the show, but man, I can't watch it because it stresses me out. I very briefly worked in a fast food kitchen. It was a pizza restaurant when I was kind of 22-ish, and I still have a little bit of I don't want to call it PTSD, but I still have a little bit of trauma from working in that environment because it was loud and chaotic and shouty and stressful, and customers would talk down to you, and it just, not a great experience. I did not enjoy it at all. I still get anxiety thinking about, there was this time, between, if the restaurant closed at 9, I used to hate working until close because, your roster would say you're on till 9 o'clock, but you knew you're never getting out of there at 9 o'clock. And despite your best efforts, you would do everything. You'd mop up at 8:30. You'd get everything put away. You would start to put the table, the chairs in the dining area away. You'd get everything sort of boxed up. You're sort of ready to get out of there. And then at 5 minutes till 9 o'clock, someone would place a fucking online order and the printer would just start fucking going. And that sound of the receipt print, I don't know what you call it, the docket, the receipt printer, that if I never have to hear that fucking sound again, it'll be too soon. It's just the worst ever kind of dread, because you think to yourself, oh yeah, okay, we're almost out of there. It's 9 o'clock. It's a pretty quiet day. We haven't had any phone orders come through. There's no customers in the store. We might actually get out of here on time. And then you just hear that as it's printing, and you're like, your blood just goes cold, and you're like, okay, cool. So we're going to be here until 10 o'clock tonight. I could probably tell you this story because it's been long enough. It's been long enough that I can tell it. What we used to do, because my whole logic was okay, if we're closing at 9 o'clock and a delivery takes 30 minutes to complete, then okay, you place your order at 8:30, we're closing at 9. That's borderline. It's annoying. I'm going to be annoyed with you, but whatever. You've still got 30 minutes for us to complete the thing. But I always used to argue there should be a cutoff for deliveries where if there's not enough time, you can't place it. If there's 20 minutes left in the opening hours of the store and a delivery takes 30 minutes, then that's not enough time. You've missed out. You fucking get your act together next time and try again tomorrow. That was my logic anyways. Me who was wanting to go home on time and did not enjoy the job. And so what we used to do is we would this is so bad. We would put we would crank the delivery time up on the website because you could change how long delivery times took. So it'd be if you're getting busy, it would be okay, pickup is now going to take 20 minutes instead of 15 minutes, and delivery time is going to take 40 minutes, 50 minutes. I think at one point we were putting it up to an hour, because generally we found that if it was going to be a long wait, people just wouldn't bother, and you'd really ham it up on the phone. You've got 10 minutes till closing time. Someone rings up, oh yeah, can I place an order for delivery? And you'd be like, oh man, yeah, we can do it, but it's it's going to be an hour or so. So we're real flat out tonight, and we haven't got any drivers on, so yeah, we can do it, but you're going to be waiting a while. And sometimes you get people that'll be like, oh yeah, that's fine. And then you'd be like, oh, fuck, fine, we'll take the order. But then most people would just go, oh no, I'll go to Domino's or whatever it was, yeah. And so we used to also crank the delivery time up on the like internet system. So we were hoping that people would see it. Oh, it's going to be an hour. No, let's not bother. And then they would just leave it. But apparently head office was like watching, because we got an angry call from the fucking boss one time that was like, how come every Monday at like, you know, whatever it was, 8:30, the delivery time suddenly goes up to an hour. And so yeah, we got busted there. Which, you know, it is what it is, I guess, right? I'm a fucking shocking employee when it comes to jobs that I don't enjoy. But yeah, so because of that, I can't watch The Bear. It just reminds me too much of being in that kitchen and how stressful it was on like a Friday or a Saturday night. There's some other cool bits in the book as well where he talks through his sort of like, not necessarily mentors, but like people, restaurant owners that he's worked for in the past. He mentions a guy called Bigfoot, who's a real, I guess, shrewd businessman is the word from there. Like he would, they would do all these things, like if he suspected that a supplier was charging another restaurant less than one of his restaurants, he would get somebody to call up the supplier, pretend to be the other restaurant and say, oh, hey, sorry, we lost the copy of our last invoice. Can you fax us over a new one at this number? And they'd go, yeah, no worries. And then he would find out, you know, oh, they're charging them 10 cents less for shrimp. And so then he'd call them up and go at them until he got cheaper shrimp. And that was one thing that's really fascinating about this, the chef workplace, is the sort of interactions between all the different crews in the kitchen. So you have like the front of house staff, you've got, they're all like the waiters and stuff like that. Then you've got obviously the kitchen staff, you've got the bar staff, and then you've got, I guess, like management and stuff was sort of another kind of thing. And he often talks about all this kind of politicking that used to go on backstage, where he talks about how when you're in a kitchen, you want to have kind of eyes and ears everywhere, and you're always kind of what he's sleuthing for information about. He doesn't exactly say what it was about. He sort of talks about, he kind of alludes to like backstabbing or betrayal or that kind of thing. And I guess it's like politicking in any workplace, right? Someone wants to get the boss's ear so that they can sort of, I don't know, influence who gets raises and who gets preferential treatment or something. But yeah, there's apparently a whole lot of that. And so he talks about every time he would move kitchens, like there's a whole part of the book talking about like the type of people that open a restaurant. And he also looks at it in a sort of way of like, why on earth would you ever want to actually be the one bankrolling a new restaurant? And he sort of talks about there are two kinds of people. There are people that are sort of wise to the industry, and they're good at getting the money out while they can, and then also not sinking too much into it when it's obvious that it's kind of it's sinking. And then there are the sort of starry-eyed people that like they love the idea of owning a restaurant, but they don't actually seem to know anything about the industry or have any kind of experience in the industry. But for some reason, they just love the idea of opening a restaurant, or their friends come to their dinner parties and they tell them, "Oh, you do a good dinner party. You should open a restaurant." And they listen to it, and it's kind of the equivalent of when new comedians come up to me and say, "Oh yeah, everyone says to me, oh, you should be a comedian," and I'm just like, yeah, that you're not unique for that. Pretty much everyone here on the lineup has been told that at some point in their life. I wasn't, but I usually get, wait, what? Taylor Ruddle? You became a comedian? And so he sort of goes through all these kind of restaurants he'd worked through, and like what the owner was like, what their vision for the restaurant was, and then what it actually turned out to be. And pretty much always, except for the restaurant he was still working at when the book came out, which the name escapes me right now, but it was sort of one that I think it was one that he'd been in for kind of the long haul. A bit like I think what Gordon Ramsay's first sort of famous restaurant was Aubergine, I think was it called, and that you can watch Boiling Point, where it's talking about him leaving Aubergine and starting his own restaurant. Just as an aside, I saw a great tweet the other day that was like, talking about the show The Bear, and it was like, said something like, no offense, but a little sandwich place where you could get a soda pop and a sandwich and, some fries for $20 closed, and a fancy restaurant opened in its place, I would pray for that restaurant's downfall every day, which that was another thing that I sort of thought about when I was watching The Bear. I thought like, okay, so sure, you've got this place, The Bear, which is a sandwich shop or a sub shop, whatever you call it. And they're so fixated on the idea of, we're going to open a fine dining, like a Michelin star kind of restaurant here. And the whole time I was just thinking to myself, is this something that people want in the area? Like, how, I don't know. It seemed to me like they didn't do any research about like, maybe it's one of those cases where it's like, if you build it, people will come, where you just have to build the restaurant and then it'll be like, oh no, yeah, we'll go out and, the people that like fine dining will come out to experience it, I suppose. But yeah, I sort of thought, it always seems so weird to me as like, why did they think that was a good idea? But yeah, I don't know. It's a TV show, right? Don't think too hard about it, Taylor. So then there's another couple of chapters that stuck out to me on this, of this book. There's one where he talks about going to Japan, which is, if you follow me for any amount of time, you'll know that I lived there for a few years. And his whole trip there was fascinating. Like, he was working for, I think, a sort of Irish, American style. He was working for like a restaurant in New York somewhere. And his owner asked him if he would go to Japan and like sort of whip it was like a sister restaurant or the same restaurant into shape in Tokyo and kind of show them the ropes and help them figure it out and all that kind of thing. And so he talks about this trip to Japan that he took, where he lived there for about a month, I think it was. Might have been a few weeks, around about that time. And like, he doesn't speak any Japanese, but the adventurousness of him with food is just amazing, because like the whole trip was paid for by his work. I remember he was really worried because I think maybe you couldn't get alcohol on the flights or something, but he was really worried about not being able to like booze or smoke or anything like that on the flight, because it's a long flight, 20 hours or something, I think it was. And then he got there and he was experiencing some sort of like withdrawals or something like that. And it ended up being some really mundane reason. I forget what exactly it was. He thought he was dying, I think it was. But yeah, just the adventurousness of him. He would just walk into a restaurant, any hole in the wall restaurant, and he would just sit down, kind of point at something that someone else had, and said, "I'll have that." And like, I'm really picky with food. I would never be brave enough to go do that in a restaurant, especially in another country where I have no idea what anything could be. But the whole trip just sounded so much fun. Like, he was just kind of there, experiencing everything. And there's this one particular meal they had where if you've ever been to like a sushi restaurant, you'll be familiar with the term of omakase, which is like recommendation, or like you kind of leave it to the chef. And apparently if you go to a sushi restaurant, and this is a little tidbit I've learnt, if you really want to make the sushi chef happy, just tell them omakase, which is like, I'll leave it in your hands. Because then they'll just bring you all sorts of stuff, like probably stuff that they're not, they don't get to make often, or, ones they think are their specialty or whatever it is. They'll just give you like a real kind of like tasting course of stuff. And him and a few of his co-workers went to the sushi restaurant, and they had, I don't even know how many courses it was. He makes it sound like it was hundreds, but yeah, they were just eating everything. And apparently the chef was like delighted because he was just putting stuff in front of them. They were loving it. And, people were kind of watching them like, hey, these two crazy foreigners are getting after it. And he's like, yeah, that was, I think he says that was the best meal of his life. I can't remember if it was that or if it was one of the best meals of his life. I've actually got a very good friend who, he has been a chef ever since we left high school. He went to like our equivalent of Culinary Academy. And some of the stories that this guy has, he's worked in like, I forget where it was. He was in the Caribbean at one point. He worked in, I think it was the Philippines or Malaysia or something. He was at like a big resort that was all owned by the same company, but there were different restaurants within the resort or something like that. And if you're a young person listening to this now and you'd like to get into a profession that has a lot of travel built into it, I think chefing is actually one of the best professions you can get into, because like, if you think about it, you really don't need a lot of stuff to make it happen. Like, you'll obviously have your good set of chef's knives, and there's even a bit where Bourdain gives you a great list of like, he's like, don't worry about all that other shit that everyone tells you to get. Like, here are the 3 or 4 knives that you actually need in the kitchen, and then some stuff about like stainless steel pans and a few other gadgets and stuff from the kitchen. But it's a great guide. And then obviously you have your Chef Whites, and then that's about it really. You can just take that anywhere in the world. And there are certain other professions that I find fascinating a bit like that. Like I remember I went with a friend. She was going to get a tattoo, and we the thing with tattooing is I didn't realize I don't have any tattoos myself, and so I've never really been immersed in the culture of it. But like the thing that I learnt from this from this experience is that there's a lot of just sitting around and talking when you're in a tattoo shop, and we were talking to this guy. She was getting tattooed by someone, and he was tattooing someone else, and so we're all kind of just sitting around and chatting, and his life sounded really fascinating. Like he was in New Zealand on like a working holiday visa, and it was that thing where like I think with tattoo, I don't know this for sure, but I think with tattooing it's just sort of like they can use any kind of tattoo gun. Like I don't think there are sort of as far as I know, there are not like, you don't need to bring specifically your tattoo gun to do it. I think you can just kind of turn up at any shop, and then you probably have, I imagine you have ways to, the ways that you like your setup and everything. But for the most part, I think they can sort of just pick up and go anywhere. And I always sort of lamented the fact that I never really felt like I got into any kind of career where you don't need a bunch of junk and you can sort of easily travel around. Like I think comedy, you can't, sure, there is a lot of travel involved, but you're sort of limited to performing in the country where you can speak the language, or the people there can understand the language that you speak. And then even then, if you're doing wordplay and stuff, that further limits what countries you can perform in. Whereas like chefing is sort of a universal language. You learn the process, you learn all the keywords you need, you learn this and that. You probably learn enough of the local language to kind of get by. And then essentially, especially from my buddy, seems like you can just sort of pick up and go anywhere. And some of these stories he told me, he used to do these events that were like, I don't exactly know what you'd call it. He was like a private chef for like rich people throwing brunches and stuff at their house, I guess. And he was telling me all these stories of like having to bring all this gear, and like he would be in, they'd be working in some rich family's like summer house or something, and he would ask, okay, so do you have a refrigerator? Do you have an oven? Do you have this and that? And like most of them would say, oh yeah, we've got all that stuff. But then they would turn up and find out they've literally never turned the oven on before, so they don't know if it actually works. Or, have you got a refrigerator? Yeah, we've got a refrigerator. And then it turns out the refrigerator's not in the kitchen, it's down in the basement. So they have to go down a bunch of steps every time they want to go into the refrigerator. And like, I'm sure it was a ball ache at the time, but man, he's got some good stories from when he was working those kind of events. I've always been curious about the life of a tattoo artist, actually. That I feel like that should be a guest that I bring on the podcast next. I might see if I can contact some local artists and see if anyone's interested in talking to me, because I'd be kind of fascinated to learn what that life is like. I mean, that's an interesting podcast. Imagine if I was getting a tattoo and we just recorded the conversation. That would be kind of cool. And then so back to Bourdain's book. The last chapter is a really great way to wrap it all up, for lack of a better word. Like he's talking about his hands, chef's hands, and we all know that sort of the stereotype that chefs can take a stainless steel pan off the burner with their bare hand and it doesn't even hurt them. And I always wondered is that the sort of thing that's going to do permanent damage to you later in life, or is it the sort of thing that your hands just get stronger and I don't know, the nerve endings die, or I don't know, like, because he talks about all the scars that he's got on his hands, and he's got a pinky that's kind of broken because he did something and bent it or broke it or something. He's got like a callus on one of his, I think it was his middle finger, that he uses to sort of guide the knife when he's chopping onions or tomatoes, that kind of thing. And he apparently has to be careful not to hit the callus when he chops. Scars and burn marks, and just his hands are his hands are knackered. And he also talks about having his feet. I think the chapter starts with him waking up on a Sunday on his day off, and he kind of takes stock of like the state that his body's in. And like that was one thing I remember that I hated about working in the kitchen, is just you're on your feet for like, you know, we'd start at 10 in the morning, finish up at like 8 or 9, depending on how busy of a day it was. You would have a bit of a break in the middle, and obviously you'd have, you know, especially if I was doing deliveries during the day or something like that. But for the most part, you're on your feet for fucking, what is that, 10 hours of the day or something? I used to get home and my feet were just aching. And I was a lot skinnier then as well, so I can't even imagine how fucking bad my feet would feel doing a shift like that today. And yeah, there's just something beautiful about this chapter, because it's sort of like every little scar and callus and broken bone and everything in his hands is sort of it's tied to an experience or a kitchen that it happened in or what have you. And I'm kind of fascinated by, I guess you'd call the expression like wear and tear. I'm someone that's really makes me anxious to have things that are in bad condition, like ratty condition. But then at the same time, I also like if I buy stickers, I'll never actually put stickers on anything. I just, because then they'll get damaged. But this one thing I'm trying to do more deliberately is use, if I buy, like I've got about 4 notebooks that I bought, and I thought, oh, this is a nice notebook. And then I just, never used it because I didn't want to like mar the pristine form of the notebook, So I've been trying to deliberately use things more, and I'm always fascinated with this sort of wear and tear of life. Like if you look at like a staircase in I think it's the Tower of Pisa, you just see the grooves where people's feet have worn it as they're walking up and down it every year. And I'm trying to think what else. Yeah, I guess I just find that idea that the fact that you can see that something has been used, it's almost like evidence of life. I'm not really too sure how to explain it any better, but yeah, I'm fascinated with that kind of stuff. So this chapter is he's kind of taking stock of his body, and it almost feels like in a way he's kind of asking himself, has the journey been worth it up until this point? And like it is, he still clearly loved being a chef by the end of this, and he was excited about getting back into the kitchen. And it was, this chapter was just the perfect way to sort of bookend the whole kind of novel. Like it felt very reflective, and it was just, it was a fantastic way to sort of wrap everything up. And speaking of wrapping things up, I think that will just about do us for another episode. Sorry, this one was a little bit shorter, I think, than I wanted it to be, but I've just had a lot, I've had a lot going on. I'm rehearsing for the 3 Bears play. I've done a couple of podcasts. I've had meetings with some friends about design. I'm just all yapped out. To be honest, I keep having to stop and start recording this episode. I've got such brain fog this morning. I'm looking forward. I'm going out to watch, I think I mentioned it in my last episode, I'm going to watch Dan Bain record his trilogy of shows tonight in about 5 hours after recording this. So I'm looking forward to that. Can't wait to see it. And I think in between now and then I'm going to melt my brain a little bit and play some Stardew Valley. So thank you for listening. Now, the only plugs I want to get in before we go are obviously come and check me out as Papa Bear and the Goldilocks and the 3 Bears for the Canterbury Children's Theatre. That is during the school holidays. Just head along to the Instagram page there. You see all the dates. It's $10. Shows are at 11 a.m. and 1 p.m. I did a read-through with my friend Grant the other day. Grant is probably actually listening. I know he listens to the podcast. Shout out, Grant. That was actually a lot of fun, and it was really good to see where I'm at with memorizing the script. And then the other plug is we've got Yeah Nah Comedy, which is basically a gong show. We're allowing the audience members to vote off the comedians they don't like. That is going to be at the Good Times Comedy Club. That starts from, I believe, the 7th of June, and it goes through until about the 18th of July. The winner of the league is going to win a cash prize. So that's it for another week. Thank you for listening. I do apologize if I was a bit rambly or kind of off. I don't know. I'm honestly just really foggy in the brain today. I might have to go for a walk, get some sun, maybe buy an energy drink or something. Thank you for listening. We'll catch you next week, and have a great rest of your week. Cheers. Thank you for listening to Ruddle Me This. don't forget to hit subscribe and leave me a review on your favorite podcast platform. You can find me on social media at Taylor Ruddle Comedy on all the major platforms. You can also join patreon.com/Taylor Ruddle Comedy for free, which gets you access to all sorts of extras and behind the scenes content, as well as allows you to communicate directly with me and let me know what you think of the show. Tune in again next Monday for another episode of Ruddle Me This, and until then, Ruddle her out.
This has been a Tape Deck Media production. Thank you for listening.
Hey Ruddlers, I joined a group of podcasters that we are calling the Trailer Alliance, a group of podcasters that share each other's trailers at the end of the episodes and generally support each other. So at the end of each episode for the next few weeks, I'm going to be playing a trailer of one of the members of the Trailer Alliance. And here's one of them now. I hope you like it.
Hello, Like Mother, Like Murder listeners. I am Rachel.
And I'm Heather.
We are the hosts of Like Mother, Like Murder.
We bring you the good, the badass, and the crime.
Each week, we bring you stories from missing and murdered
to survivors and women who empower you.
And of course, some mom talk sprinkled in.
Check us out wherever you get your podcasts at Like Mother, Like Murder.
And give us a follow on social media so that we can say hi.
Okay, love you, bye.
Okay, love you, bye.
Hello, it is Ryan, and we could all use an extra bright spot in our day, couldn't we? Just to make up for things like sitting in traffic, doing the dishes, counting your steps, you know, all the mundane stuff. That is why I'm such a big fan of Chumba Casino. Chumba Casino has all your favorite social casino-style games that you can play for free anytime, anywhere with daily bonuses. That should brighten your day a little. Actually, a lot. So sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com. That's ChumbaCasino.com.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.